A source says that Donald Trump is a horrible, horrible human being. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They're very dishonest people. In fact, in covering my comments, the dishonest media did not explain that I called the fake news the enemy of the people, the fake news. They dropped off the word fake, and all of a sudden, the story became the media is the enemy. They take the word fake out. But I am only against the fake news media or press. Fake. They have to leave that word. I'm against the people that make up stories and make up sources. So I'm not against the media. I'm not against the press. I don't mind bad stories if I deserve them. But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news.
Hey, welcome back to the latest installment of Genuine Questions. On the last episode, we talked about some stories that the media ignored. And in this one, I'd like to talk about a few stories the media got wrong. And I've said before that there's a difference between being wrong about something and lying about something. And when we look through this pattern of all these stories that the media has gotten wrong over the past 5 years, it's hard to make the case for them that these were just mistakes. They never seem to learn from their mistakes, and their mistakes always seem to go one-sided. So we're going to take a look at a few of them and see if we can identify some of these patterns to figure out what the media's agenda is for lying to us as often as they do. So we'll just start off chronologically here. Kind of the first thing that the media misled everybody on concerning Donald Trump was when he was running for president in 2015, and they tried to say that he said all Mexicans were rapists. And we're going to listen to what Donald Trump actually said because they totally took those comments out of context. So here we go.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people.
So there you go. He says right there, some are good people. So he indicates that he is not talking about all Mexicans like the media and the left tries to portray that he was. He was talking about the very specific problem of these human traffickers and drug smugglers who were exploiting our immigration laws at the southern border. And I'd like to know how that is any different than what Joe Biden has recently said about how Latinos, Latinx won't get vaccinated because they're scared of being deported. He is doing the same thing. He's making this generalization about all Latinos, that they're all here illegally. And I can understand the context of what both of these guys are trying to say, but it's very obvious that the media wants to bash Trump and say he's talking about all Mexicans when he specifically states that he's not. And we're going to listen to Joe Biden right here make a similar generalization about all Latinos.
There's a reason why it's been harder to get African Americans initially to get vaccinated, because they used to being experimented on. The Tuskegee Airmen and others. People have memories. People have long memories. It's awful hard as well to get Latinx vaccinated as well. Why? They're worried that they'll be vaccinated and deported.
So if you're going to give the benefit of the doubt to one person, especially if you're the news media who is supposed to be objective and just delivering the facts, I would think that same benefit of the doubt would be extended to both people regardless of their political party. But instead, one guy's a racist who is really talking about all Mexicans, even though he explicitly states that he's not, and the other guy's fine, although he made no exception. He just said Latinx, didn't specify some, like Trump did. The second thing that they took out of context here with Trump is the Access Hollywood tape. where he talks about grabbing women by their yoo-hoos. So as you can see right here, the news, they're trying to report this as Trump is bragging about non-consensually groping women, which is not what he said at all. You can think what he said is gross and disgusting. You can think it's just locker room talk, but let's not misquote what the guy is saying, and we can listen to it here really quick and listen to the full quote in context and not just the little snippet the media likes to pick out.
I moved on her, actually. You know, she was down in Palm Beach. I moved on her, and I failed. I'll admit it.
Whoa.
I did try and her. She was married. I gotta use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. I just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
So he says right there in the tape that he said they'll let you do it. So he's talking about gold diggers, and gold diggers do exist. There are certain women out there that will let rich, powerful men take advantage of them because of what they might get out of it. No judgment, but it's ridiculous to think that those people don't exist. And I'd also like to point out that NBC sat on this tape for like 10 years. That tape was recorded in 2005, and in the meantime, NBC had no problem putting Donald Trump as the star of The Apprentice, making a ton of money off of him, making him a ton of money, and giving him this huge platform. And it wasn't until it was politically convenient to do so on the same day that the WikiLeaks dumped the DNC emails. On that same day, that's when they decided that they needed to let everybody know that Donald Trump was bragging about sexually assaulting people. It's pretty transparent and, quite frankly, pretty insulting that they're trying to take the moral high ground on this one. So in one of, to me, the most infuriating times that the media has taken what Trump said out of context was the Charlottesville protests, whatever you want to call them. So, and the news loves to report that Donald Trump was defending the white supremacists, and he keeps doing it over and over again. And it says here in hard-hitting journalism BuzzFeed that Trump told reporters that people were protesting the taking down of the monument of Robert E. Lee. And then the author, the reporter, says making no reference to the white supremacists who organized the event. And so that Stedman woman from BuzzFeed is a liar. And we are going to listen to exactly what Trump said in context, because he does make a reference to the white supremacists that were at the event, and he specifically condemns them.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? In the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
So say what you want about Trump's style and his delivery. He is not the most eloquent speaker. I will give you that. But I actually think what he did right there was very presidential, in spite of what ABC News says were a low point in his presidency. There were 4 categories of people that were at this event, and Trump covers all of his bases. On the right, he condemns the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, but he also doesn't besmirch the character of the people who were just protesting the taking down of the statues. And then on the left, he acknowledges that there were some fine people over on that side as well. but he also condemns the people that showed up who were looking for a fight and wanted to respond with violence. So you're supposed to be the president for all the people. I can't think of what a better statement, in spite of his delivery, what a better statement to make to cover all aspects of what went on. So Joe Biden continues to lie about this and uses his campaign. He's had to be fact-checked for saying Trump's never condemned neo-Nazis. He's actually done it at least 2 times. And then they continue to bring it up again when they want to tie this to other things that they have no evidence of that Trump was responsible for, like the Capitol attack, and try to conflate all of these false stories to make it seem like, oh, there's a whole lot of evidence for this. And then I also think it is funny that Trump got so much crap because this white supremacist Charlottesville organizer, Richard Spencer, endorsed him in 2016. And Trump was considered a Nazi white supremacist because that's who the Nazis and the white supremacists liked. Wasn't because Trump said anything. The argument was, oh, well, if the Nazis like you, then you better rethink your candidate. Well, look who Richard Spencer voted for in 2020. So is that argument now moot? Are we not supposed to condemn Joe Biden for being a racist because turns out the racists like him more than they like Donald Trump? Or was that all just blatant character attacks, what was supposed to be done by a nonpartisan, fact-centric news media? And the media is not just satisfied with smearing Trump's reputation, they're also willing to take these stories out of context and smear regular citizens and his supporters' reputation. Sometimes even teenagers, like in the case of Nick Sandmann, who you might remember as the kid who was in Washington, D.C. wearing the MAGA hat, and the Native American guy came and beat the drum in his face, and everybody accused these kids of taunting him, and this kid having an evil smirk and making fun of this Native American. And people went nuts. We can watch this montage about how everyone in the media and in Hollywood reacted to these false accusations, what turned out to be false accusations against these teenagers.
Anna Navarro of CNN called the boys racists and asswipes and then went after their teachers and their parents. Others called for violence against them. CNN legal analyst Bakari Sellers suggested one of the boys should be, quote, punched in the face. Former CNN contributor Reza Aslan agreed. Aslan asked on Twitter this: have you ever seen a more punchable face than this kid's? Longtime CNN contributor Kathy Griffin seemed to encourage a mob to rise up and hurt these boys. Quote, name these kids. I want names. Shame them. If you think these efforts wouldn't dox you in a heartbeat, think again. Then she repeated her demand again later. Quote, names, please, and stories from people who can identify them and vouch for their identity. Thank you. Hollywood film producer Jack Morrissey tweeted that he wanted the boys killed. Quote, MAGA kids go screaming hats first into the wood chipper. And then he paired that with a graphic photo. Actor Patton Oswalt linked to personal information about one of the boys in case anyone wanted to get started on that project. Meanwhile, Twitter, which claims to have a policy against encouraging violence, stood by silently as all of this happened. But did the video really describe what happened? That should have been the first question that journalists asked. And yet, amazingly, almost nobody in the American media did that. And that's a shame because there was a lot to check. A longer look shows that the boys from Covington Catholic in Kentucky were not a roving mob looking for a fight. They were, in fact, and it shows it on the tape, standing in place waiting to be picked up by a bus. And then Nathan Phillips, the now famous American Indian activist, approached them, pounding on his drum. But in any case, there is no evidence at all that anybody said, build a wall.
So I agree with Tucker Carlson there. Like, why would you not investigate that first? I have a hard time believing that the media didn't have access to that entire clip and were only given that small portion. And if that is what happened, shame on them for not investigating further because it only took like a day or two for the whole story to come out. So it's not like that was buried really deep. But we're going to listen to the ladies on The View accidentally slip up and say what the motivation is for why the media tends to jump to these conclusions that are always anti-Trump. and tend to turn out to be not the full story.
So the school kids were blamed for being the aggressors. But then the extended footage was released that showed a group of black Israelites mocking the kids and the Native American. We just instantly say that's what it is based on what we see in that moment, and then have to walk stuff back when it turns out we're wrong. Why is that? Do we keep making the same mistake?
Because we're desperate to get Trump out of office. That's the reason. I think the press jumps the gun a lot because we have so much circumstantial evidence against this guy that we basically are hoping that, Cohen's got the goods and what have you. And so it's wishful thinking.
So I don't think the media should be engaged in wishful thinking. They should be reporting the truth and the facts. And you would think if you honest, you can make this mistake maybe one or two times, but then you would recognize a pattern, and to protect your own credibility, you wouldn't want to keep making those same mistakes. But time and time again, as we'll see, they continue to do so. And what's infuriating about the Nick Sandmann story is these people in the media refuse to admit that they were wrong, even when the whole story came out. They actually went through and found some pictures from one of their old high school yearbooks of kids that were like 6 years older than Nick Sandmann and his classmates, who were at a basketball game that was one of those blackout basketball games where everybody dresses in all black and the kids paint their bodies and their faces. And usually the opposing team, they'll do a whiteout and they'll dress in all white. So this is a thing that high schoolers do. Everybody that's been to an American high school is probably aware of something like this happening, yet the media, New York Daily News, tries to smear these kids as doing blackface, to be like, we told you we were right and these kids were racist. And here are some funny tweets where people actually call them out on it, but make good points. So you're trying to prove you were right about an out-of-context video by sharing another out-of-context video. Again, doubling down on their own bullshit to try to convince people that they were right. Seems like gaslighting, a word the left loves to use but can't recognize if it smacks them in the face. And another funny one was on here. So, journalists. Conservatives need to stop being so paranoid. No one's out to get them or attack their values. Also journalists. Here's some oppo on pro-life Catholic kids that someone found by mining old videos of a blackout basketball game. We're running it as news. So you are trying to smear these people's reputations. You are out to get them. You're not just trying to report the truth. You are looking for reasons to take out of context, to make them look bad, to push an agenda, which is the most irresponsible, dishonest thing that the media can do. Another time that the media completely missed the ball on the story was the time that they said Trump cleared out Lafayette Park with protesters and tear gas and rubber bullets because he wanted to go take a photo op in front of the church. Here's a media montage where they just foam at the mouth at this bullcrap.
We're going to begin at the White House, where President Trump spoke out for the first time from the Rose Garden, vowing to send U.S. troops into the streets of American cities if local authorities don't control the protests. Those remarks came just moments after the administration asked police to clear peaceful protesters from the park across the White House so the president could stage a photo op.
Yeah, we're learning more about what was behind this last-minute photo op.
You know, this is a park where the protesters have been lined up for days now protesting against the death of George Floyd, and it was just completely emptied out. It's just extraordinary what was done here. They were used to create a photo opportunity for the president so he could hold up a Bible.
Jim, this photo opportunity, he didn't even know what to do once he got there. This thing was so badly thought out.
This was ham-handed, no question about it.
How did this entire evening come about from the White House?
We saw the night before more fires at Lafayette Park, the image of the White House going dark at 11 p.m., which is standard procedure. It often goes dark around 11 for security reasons, but yet the striking contrast between the shadows of the White House and then the fires at Lafayette Park. And then, of course, we had him speak in the Rose Garden yesterday, announced that he would, if needed, send American soldiers to American cities to keep them safe, in his words. As he's talking from the Rose Garden, you could hear the tear gas canister explosions behind him. You could hear the park being cleared, all for a photo op, Willie. Surrounded by members of his senior staff and cabinet, all of whom, it must be noted, at a time of racial unrest, all of them were white.
So a couple funny things about that video, or that clip. I like how they tried to make the White House turning its lights out at 11 p.m. seem like something sinister when they openly admit that's just standard procedure, and that's what happens every night. But they try to take the mundane and the normal and the standard procedure and make it seem evil and terrible when Donald Trump does it. I don't understand how anybody falls for that and doesn't hear that and be like, what? How the hell is that news? Like, that's just what they do every single night, and you're the one that just told me that. So why is that a big deal? Why are you trying to make that into a bad thing? And then I also think it's funny, too, that they just crap on him for being all white. And it's not just the news who's doing this. I mean, there's top military officials. Here in the Atlantic, James Mattis denounces this and talks about, you would think James Mattis, who, this high-level military official, that he would know that Trump didn't order them to do that. But instead, he talks about how bizarre it is for Trump to use the military to stage this bizarre photo op. It's very disingenuous and shows that this goes much deeper than just the media. There are people in our highest levels of intelligence and the military that go along with these charades too. And we should all be concerned about that. And then as you'll see, they ended up having to retract this a few months later because the inspector general found out that that is not what happened, that the park police cleared that park earlier in the day for unrelated reasons, and Trump's visit to the church had nothing to do with it. That was all the park police. And this would be Joe Biden's inspector general, because it's June 2021. So Joe Biden's president here. So this is not somebody running cover for Donald Trump to say that he wasn't involved in it. This is Joe Biden's own inspector general who made this ruling. So we're on a roll here. There's a time where they said that Trump called up the Georgia Secretary of State or elections official or something and was pressuring them to find the fraud. You'll be a national hero if you do this. Making it seem like he was pressuring them to change the results of the election in a nefarious way. But as you'll see here with all the fact checks, that's actually not what happened. They found the recording of that phone call in somebody's trash folder on their computer. So they knew that they had it and they deleted it and then reported that Trump said things that he didn't actually say. And says here the Washington Post, who initially reported this, relied on just one source, and it turns out that person didn't even hear the call firsthand. So all these other news outlets just took the Washington Post and their anonymous source who heard this information secondhand and actually got it wrong, they just took it all as fact and ran with it. So you would think that under normal circumstances, you would want to know who this bad source is who gave these investigators this information. If the source gave you bad information, it's no longer like an ethical violation. You're not protecting a source's identity. You actually would have a pretty legitimate lead and investigation to follow to see who's doing all these false leaks about the administration to the media and what their agenda is. But they don't pursue that lead and instead just keep using these anonymous sources that continuously get the story wrong once the evidence and the facts come out. Excuse me. And in a more recent example of the media purposely taking Trump out of context and misconstruing his words would be the time that they told everybody that he said that to fight coronavirus, they can drink bleach. So before we listen to how the media reports on this, let's listen to what Trump actually was saying in the press conference.
Supposing we hit the body, tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute, and is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning. I would like you to speak to the medical doctors to see if there's any way that you can apply light and heat to cure.
So nowhere in that press conference did he tell anybody to drink bleach or Lysol or inject themselves with anything. I'll admit, it doesn't sound very smart what he's saying. I don't recommend that he talks off the cuff like that about stuff that he doesn't really understand. But listen to how the media reported what he said at that press conference.
Is it a serious problem when the President of the United States talks about something that is poisonous, which is ingesting Lysol or another disinfectant?
President Trump offering new but unproven suggestions of how to kill COVID-19 in patients using UV rays and injecting disinfectants such as bleach and alcohol.
This morning, medical experts are nearly unanimous in saying that trying unproven treatments can prove to be very dangerous, especially ingesting or injecting disinfectants. In fact, the maker of Lysol has issued a warning this morning concerned that people may try it.
You can't take that out of context because there is no context in which you recommend to the American people, particularly those who are suffering with COVID-19, that they inject themselves with bleach or some type of disinfectant.
He says you should pump Lysol into your lung. He doesn't believe in science.
And we had hundreds of calls come into our emergency hotline at our health department asking if it was right to ingest Clorox or alcohol cleaning products.
Hundreds of people calling in to ask the question whether or not it was okay to eat a Tide Pod or suck down some Lysol because of what the president said.
I knew growing up that with my children that if I would use scrubbing bubbles to clean the bathtub before
You don't eat them.
they got in there, but would not spray it in my children's mouth or in my own mouth if I had a fever or a disease. Like, this is so beyond madness.
Maybe you could inject some bleach in your arm, and that would take care of it.
And then he started talking about bleach and disinfectants and injecting them. Yes, his words, injecting them.
People are still drinking bleach because they think it will cure their ailments caused by coronavirus. So why would anyone think that? Where would anyone get that idea? I wonder.
Trump suggests injecting bleach the way other people try and float a threesome.
Inject Lysol into your lungs. What is this?
So the media is being so misleading there, and and it's uniform in how they all report that he said drink bleach, drink Lysol, inject yourself. That's not what he said at all, and none of them call that out. They all have access to the clip that we're referencing. And with uniformity, all of these news channels report on fake quotes that he said. Not defending what Trump said, he actually annoyed the crap out of me when he tried to walk that back and say that it was sarcasm, because there actually were, I don't understand why he just didn't point to the studies that he had been given right before that briefing that apparently talked about the light and disinfectant on surfaces. And then why not just say, like, hey, I misunderstood what I had heard. Yeah, my bad. But instead he went with the, I was being sarcastic. So that's very annoying on Trump and his ego getting in the way. But I am more concerned about the media blatantly and uniformly presenting fake quotes than I am about Trump's ego getting the better of him. And another funny part of this story is the media tried to say that Donald Trump was responsible for this man's death in Arizona because him and his wife were watching that press conference and they were just taking Trump's advice that he should, take hydroxychloroquine. And so she saw on her container of fish tank cleaner that had hydroxychloroquine in it. So she gave it to her and her husband, and he ended up dying. And this is all because she listened to Trump, and it's his fault. This made international news. And what didn't make international news was when the rest of the story came out that this woman was actually a huge Democratic supporter and donor. So I don't think she was spending a lot of time getting her medical advice from Donald Trump. It seems like she absolutely hated him. But she also purposely gave her husband that fish tank cleaner because she was trying to murder him. So that is what actually happened. So this woman murdered her husband and tried to blame it on Donald Trump, and the media ran with her story and then didn't bother to present the rest of the story when it all came out. When Donald Trump and his supporters, chant and rail on the fake news, this is what they're talking about. These misleading, out of context stories that time and time again happen to push this narrative that he's this evil, racist, white supremacist, literally Hitler. And that is not an attack on freedom of the press, as they try to say. That is an attack on propaganda and misleading, false stories, taken out of context quotes. And that does deserve to be called out. Because as we can see with the huge divide in our country and nobody knows what to believe is true or not, it does cause a lot of division, and it does manipulate people into thinking that they are fighting for the good guys when in actuality they are being misled. So on the next episode of Genuine Questions, we're going to take a look at the biggest story that the media has ignored and misled us on for over a decade, and that is the Jeffrey Epstein case. And we're going to take a look into that and ask a few genuine questions about the people who were most intimately involved in his inner circle.
I always ask for examples, and then we can hit those examples one by one. And if it's worth criticizing, it's worth criticizing. But just kind of this broad brush criticism that the president is somehow undermining our democracy. What is he undermining exactly? What democratic freedoms have been undermined? Style is one thing. If you want to criticize style, I'm with you, right? But to say it's an attack on the freedom of the press, that is a very bold statement. We tend to go right at the jugular, right? We say you're undermining democracy, you're a bad person fundamentally. That's not always true. We have policy disagreements on a lot of these things.
These are complex issues where reasonable minds can perhaps differ.